again, this is a bit of a busy slide, but I'm going to start just by talking about the stuff on the left-hand side of this, the affordability example, okay? And this is basically how they work out how much you can borrow for a mortgage. So I don't know if anyone in here has got a job, but I'm just glad, well, you guys work for Inside Success, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use it based upon these examples, okay? And these numbers might seem overwhelming, and I don't want anyone to be scared off by numbers because, as I said before, there's lots of different schemes and stuff that you can use, but I'm just going to throw these numbers out, okay? So this really talks about somebody who makes 23 grand per year. And how the bank work it out is more often than not, they will let you borrow up to 4.5 times your annual salary. So here, the person who earns 23K, you would times that by 4.5, which will equal 103.5 grand, okay? So that means that that person is allowed to buy a property of that price. Now, it seems like a big number, but if you was going to buy somewhere like London, the average London house price currently is 496 grand, which I didn't even realize it was that high until today I Googled it. So that might not get you something decent in London. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's definitely properties way less than that. You know, a lot of kind of apartments and stuff like that are way less than that. But it just means that you don't have loads to play with here, okay? And so in this instance, I would say one of two things, okay? So either think about purchasing with somebody else, and I'll show you that example in a second, or number two, think about purchasing in a cheaper area away from London, okay? So I'm going to talk about, first of all, purchasing with somebody else. So let's just say, as I mentioned before, 23 times 4.5 equals 103.5 for one person. Whereas if two people earned 23K, then that will equal 46 grand. And then 46 grand times 4.5 will then give you 207,000 to play with, okay? So you can definitely get something a little bit better than what you could get on your own if you did it with somebody else. And then once again, the last example on the slide is if you did it with up to 3 people. So you can put up to 4 people on one mortgage application. So again, if 4 of you earn 23 grand, you end up being able to borrow 414 grand, which is more than enough to buy yourself a property, maybe even 2 if you wanted to. So again, it's a question for yourself, which is, do I want to buy on my own or do I want to buy with somebody else? And what I will say is if you do ever decide to buy with somebody else, make sure it's a trusted person. So, you know, maybe your brother, your cousin, your bestie, whoever, you know, someone that you really trust. That's one. And the second thing I would say is make sure that you're both very clear on your mortgage strategy. So if one of you are buying the property because you want to live in it, but the other one's buying it because they want to rent it out, it's not going to work. So you have to both have the same strategy with reference to why you're buying. And also I would say as a third thing really is to have an exit strategy. So what, you know, at what point do you want to go your separate ways with this property? You know, are you just doing it so that you can both pull some money out later down the line to get your own properties? Is this going to be, I don't know, a student house, or, you know, just kind of know if you're going to do it with someone else, why you're doing it with that person, okay? So that's what I would say around that. So the second thing then is to talk a little bit about LTV, which again stands for loan to value. So this is the kind of mortgage jargon that the banks use, okay? And so if you was ever to look at a mortgage deal, it may say something like the bank will offer you 90% loan to value for a residential mortgage. And all that basically means is a mortgage has to be 100%. So if they're going to give you up to 90%, it means that you have to bring the other 10% as a deposit, okay? So I hope that makes sense. And so that's the general rule again around residential. Whereas if you was going to get a buy to let, you'll see that the mortgage deals will say, you know, up to 75% loan to value, which then means that you need to bring a 25% deposit, okay? So let's talk about this with reference to the sums that we just did, okay? So where's this number come from? I've made a bit of a mistake there, but never mind. So but let's just say for argument's sake then, your property costs 126 grand, okay? So let's just say you was buying it on your own and it cost 126 grand. If you was then going to live in it and you needed to do a 10% deposit, it means that you need to bring 12,600 pounds as a deposit if you're going to do it as a residential. And if you're going to buy to let it, it means that you have to bring 31,500 pounds, okay? So I know these sums sound really crazy, but they are all achievable, okay? So just keep that in your head. So any questions on that? Okay, I'll take that as a no. All right, so we're going to keep going then. So that is mortgages, and that is affordability and loan to value and how that works, okay? So the next thing I want to do really is to talk a bit about how you go about looking for properties, where to go, what to consider. So really where to look, what to look for, some of the specifics, and how to go about looking, okay? And I think when it comes down to getting yourself on the property ladder, just having in your head, you know, once again, back to what we said in the beginning, what are your property goals? Because if you know that you're going to buy a property to live in, then you might, I don't know, I'm assuming everyone's London based here. So you might want to be in London or in or around London because that's where you know. Whereas if you're buying a property to rent out and invest, you might want to buy it up north somewhere because they're way cheaper, but you could still get some cash flow. So it's just all about what your property goals and strategy are, okay? So let's talk a bit about location then. So you'll always, as a general rule, get people wanting to live in London. And do you know what? I'm saying this, but once again, a lot has changed with COVID. So because everybody's working from home at the moment, there's a lot of people who've lived in London, paying crazy prices in London, who are now thinking about moving out of London because they don't need to be in the office every day anymore. So if they're only going to be there a couple of days a week, they might not mind doing a commute for an hour to 45 minutes if it's just 2 days a week. So they're moving out of London because you get more for your money when you buy out of London. So, so even though I'm kind of saying these things, we're in a situation at the moment where things are just changing every day. But as a general rule, once again, from a London point of view, London generally always has demand. Oh, did someone have a question? I thought I heard a question there. Yeah, so London always has demand. There's always people who want to live there. Generally, even if you're doing buy to let, you can do things like renting it out with Airbnb for tourists and stuff like that, and you'll generally get quite a lot for your money in London from a rental point of view. But from a purchasing point of view, it's always way more expensive to buy in London. So as you probably know, the house prices are way more than the rest of the country in London. So it swings and roundabouts, okay? So there are various things to consider really. So some of it really is what type of place would you want to buy? So you've got options as in you could buy houses. There's loads of apartments being built at the moment, as I'm sure you've all seen, lots of new build ones. There's commercial properties, you could buy land. And I think a lot of people kind of think of land and then they think of abroad. but you can buy land in the UK as well and build houses on it too. So if you know you've got links to good builders or anything like that, you could build yourself a new build property if you wanted to, you know. You could buy boats if you want. So you could do all kinds of stuff. Do any of you live in a council house or a housing association? No? Okay.
No.
No, okay. I was just going to say, if anyone ever did, something that's really great with, if you've already got a council house, is after you've, which some of you may know this already, but after you've lived in it for 2 years, they give you something called the right to buy, which basically means that you can purchase that property without the need of a deposit. So they will take whatever rent that you've paid as the deposit, and then you can purchase that so that you've got an asset there of your own. So even if, again, any of your parents live in a right to buy, it might be worth even checking that out, because if you are living in the house with them, you will be down as a joint tenant potentially, and you know, together you can maybe make that your first purchase as well. So that's something to look into, the right to buy.
Hi, I'm Miss Neisha Cain, and you need this in your life. You need to buy and subscribe. Inside Success.